Okay. All right. Well, we'll throw it open for any questions or things you want to share.
Well, I got a big mouth. I can always talk.
Carry on.
Yeah. Um, I'm just, I just wanted to share, you know, in our previous conversations, how the Lord's been taking me through various parables and going deeper into them.
Hmm.
He's really been, I'll just share this. I would come and sit with him, and every time it was like time for me to leave, and he would give me oil. And then one time he just said, "You will never run out of oil." And that sparked something in me. You know how he says something and he deposited deeper seeds, and it immediately took me to the parable of the 10 virgins, five wise, five foolish. And I knew that there was something about it that you could give the foolish oil. You could give oil. He took me to the oil room. He showed me how the hand of God squeezes oil from people and it is saved, much like the wine room. That there's an oil room. It's from the strength and the hand of God that it comes out of our lives. And he's just going deeper and deeper into this parable. So I knew you could give the oil, give away oil. And, so I started asking him about it. And he said, one time he was like, why were the five wise virgins not as wise as you've been taught or think? And I'm like, well, God, you know, you know. And he says, because if they knew me intimately, they would never have been afraid to give away all that they had. I would not have turned them away from the wedding feast. And in fact, they'd have a place of honor. And when he said that, it was like he was talking about the seat next to him, the bride, the bridal company. Because he's already told me that not everyone's the bride. Not the whole church is not the bride. There are many different roles at a wedding feast. So he was talking about the bride company, and I'm like, wow, stuff like that just makes you cry. And so the latest installment of that lesson, someone asked if they could meet with me on a regular basis and I could talk them through some things. And I said, well, let me ask God. And he just said, why do you think I'm giving you oil? You think it's because you just sit up here with me, because you sit up here and spend time with me? He said, and I'm like, well, Lord, it's one of those, you tell me why. He said, because I will always present you with a vessel to pour into. And then he took me right to the story of the widow. The oil never ran out until she ran out of vessel. He's just going deeper and deeper into these things, and it just really, I'm at this point now where I'm at a point where I gotta share it because it's like fire, You gotta start publishing it. I gotta paint it, It's crazy.
Yeah.
There's so many layers, so many deeper layers than what we know, what we're taught, and so many connections we never made.
Yeah, I think with everything, there's always depths. I think it's interesting when you think of oil and you think of some of the um, miraculous outpourings of oil that are going on at the minute. There's obviously one in Tennessee, I think, where the Bible is just pouring out oil into a bucket thing, and they're just scooping it off, and more of it comes. And then there's another place where I think oil is running down the walls and just coming out of the walls. I guess that must be some sort of sign, which is an indication around oil and how significant it is. Obviously, the Bible's full of oils, and you got essential oils and all the anointing oils and all of those things. But it does seem that there is something about it. Like a few years ago, it was gemstones, and now people are using gemstones, and people are seeing the significance of gemstone. And I think at the moment, maybe it's the season for oil and what oil is a representation of. And I do think, the squeezing is the bit that people don't really necessarily want, is it? They're quite happy to have the oil, but they don't want the process that produces the oil. And it does take quite a lot to press anything to get oils out of it. I mean, essential oils, they're so expensive because it takes a heck of a lot of growing of the plants and whatever to then be able to produce pure oil through the pressing process. And I think if you see, as you say, if we are being pressed and we are effectively oil to others, then we've got to be willing to go through that process of pressing and transformation to be that. And I think that's where I think a lot of people just, hide, run, don't want to go through the processes that is there for us to be pure oil. But I do think there is quite a lot, seemingly, that God is beginning to unveil. I remember when I had oil pouring out of my hands and stuff, it was just like, it seemed, what's this about? And I didn't know anything about essential oils or anything back in 2000 and whenever it was, 11. And it was just, okay, there's a reason for this, and it was very fragrant oil, and that it was carried with it such a fragrance that I can't ignore it, and sometimes it's like God gets your attention, and sometimes it's like he does things that are whoa, and I'm not really a perfumey sort of person, so to have a perfumed oil flowing out of my hands was somewhat a challenge at the time. But now I realize, I think it was part of my process, part of my process was having to be realizing that, hey, I guess you are going to be oil for others, and I think that was what he was really trying to say. But hey, then he took me through the next number of years of the process of pressing it a little bit more until it was more and more flowing. And I think that, is this symbolic of a lot of our journeys, that we go through seasons and processes that eventually bring an increase and a flow to it. When I first started engaging heaven and doing all these things, I had no concept of sharing that with people around the world or even mentoring people. It was just like, okay, this is great. Here I'm teaching people to engage it here, but I never really had the concept of this was going to flow any further. But God had that in mind, and that what he took me through to get me to the point of surrender, then I was able to say yes when he said, do this, even though I didn't know how. And effectively he's done the how. I just had to say yes. But there had to be that pressing for there to be an increased flow. Otherwise it would run out very quickly, and I think there's an ongoing process of transformation that increases the flow, so it begins to flow out, not just ankle deep, but knee deep, waist deep, until it's just flowing and flowing and flowing.
Yeah.
And I think we all have a capacity which is way beyond what most people think they have for that to flow. And unfortunately, as you said with the sort of parable, those that had the oil didn't realize that this could continue to flow, and therefore they kept it to themselves rather than giving it away. And I think a lot of people, aren't really willing to be generous with what they have to such a degree that it dries up. If we don't continually give it away, then we don't have a continual source that increases. But it's certainly a good.
When I first shared that, some of the church were offended. You can't give oil, you can't, and I'm like, I'm not telling you what I think. I'm telling you what he told me. It's one thing if I was saying I'm scratching my head pondering this. I'm telling you what, face to face, his mouth, Well, it's moving. He's talking. I saw and heard, So sorry. I'm sorry. You go and ask him,
And there's no end to the amount of vessels that need filling, are there? So I don't think we're going to run short of vessels to be filled. So we have, the promise really of an unstoppable flow.
As long as they're open.
Yep.
As long as the lid's off, as long as they're open. As long as the heart is circumcised. Because that's what he was saying about the reason the circumcision of the heart. Because things from heaven flow into the heart. And the heart has to be open. And not just for it to flow in, but for it to overflow out. And I went, okay. And he's like, that's the reason that he's circumcising hearts right now.
Yeah. To
open them up for the blessings. I'm like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
And again, the outpouring of the blessings around them. Wow.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's rivers of living water flowing from our innermost being, whether it's rivers of oil, river of fire, river of whatever. The analogy is a flow, and an increasing flow, bringing life wherever it goes. And I think that's the key to it. It is there to design to bring life, and we need it to flow, and we need to engage those who are going to be able to receive it. Otherwise, there's no point flowing to nobody, and I think that's the key, finding the connections to those that the oil is intended for. And I don't think everyone's oil is intended for everybody.
Yeah.
I think there are specific people who will benefit from the specific flow that we need to find and connect with, and not just do it willy-nilly. I think God has those that will benefit from who we are, and we will benefit from who others are, and there will be this interactiveness about it.
Mike, you said something. You said something interesting too. You said water and oil and fire. Do you know all of those flow from one individual, or can? All of it. We're fire, we're water, we're air. We're earth. We're all of those things. There are certain elements of all of them that flow through us. It's mind-boggling. That's why I just gotta put my mind aside.
Yeah.
I'm done.
I think, the flowing is the important thing. We don't want to be stagnant, and it's got to have a purpose in flowing. And I think if we're open and willing to be vessels ourselves for that flowing out, then hey, there's way, way more than most people imagine.
Maybe, we just don't always know the purpose, his purpose. Sometimes I think we might even stop it up thinking, well, what's the purpose? What's the purpose? It's like, well, okay, God, you have a reason. I trust you. I trust your reason. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else got anything they want to
yes, look, I was just wondering, Mike, if you could elaborate a little bit about the Bride of Christ. And I think on module 9 at the moment, and it's about actually going into the wedding chamber there. And I'm actually in the soaking room at the moment because I just was not ready for that. And I just heard the lady before just saying something about the bride. And can you elaborate a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, sure. It is quite a controversial topic for various reasons. Some of it, I think, because, it was alluded to that we're not the bride and all these type of things. But I think again, there are multiple levels of revelation concerning it. And so one revelation would be that the bride is being prepared. So there is a preparation process that the bride is in, and you could say that each individually we could be seen as a bride in preparation, or corporately you could be seen as a bride in preparation. but that's for a particular reason, and I think that's the thing. It's the purpose of that. When you talk about the bride in that context, then it's preparation, and that's what a bride does, don't they? They get ready on before the day, and they pick the dress, and they choose the venue, and all of that stuff that's associated with a wedding has a view of there is something leading up to the wedding that all brides go through in that sense. So that's one aspect of it, which I think probably relates to everybody, because we're all in a process of beautification, preparation, transformation in our lives. But then there's an other concept to it, that we're all invited to come into a deeper relationship with God that is not just to stay as a bride, but to become married and a wife, because a bride only is a bride on one day. And if you're a perpetual bride, then you're never going to have any consummation. So I don't want people to see themselves as perpetual brides, because, well, where's the consummation? And I think even going through the process of the garden and the dance floor and the soaking room to the bridal chamber, the bridal chamber is a consummation process of going into a deeper intimacy with God in that way. So in one perspective, I would see that we are called to be God's wife, or to be married when we've committed now. The bride has not yet made the commitment. They're waiting for the day in which they make the commitment. So in a sense, I think there are those that have made the commitment and are functioning in a different capacity to those who are not yet made the commitment, and they are functioning in still waiting to make that commitment. And I think there are all sorts of seasons that we go through in our lives that bring us to that point of commitment, and then commitment, and then commitment, and commitment, which are all can be sort of seen as that sort of process. But in reality, the actual, revelation, the marriage supper of the Lamb, and that's actually already happened figuratively from, the revelation perspective. It's not a future thing, it's a past thing, which we're now all in. So we're now all can enter into a consummated relationship with God, rather than a future one. So, but also there are parables which talk about different things, and some of them are analogies that are each part of the story has a part to play when you look at it and engage it. And then there's parables which just have an overall meaning for the story. And if you're looking at a wedding feast and a wedding ceremony, then there's going to be a bride, there's going to be a groom, there's going to be, the bridesmaids, and there's going to be the ushers, and there's going to be the best man, and all of those things within the concept of a wedding. Not everyone's the bride. And I think this is what Pamela's saying. Not everyone is a bride, because not everyone has got ready, and not everyone's made the decision to say yes yet. And so potentially everyone can be a bride or become part of the bridal company, but we may have different roles within the analogy of that, rather than it all being one. So there's different levels of revelation that is key to understand what God's trying to convey in any one particular encounter or truth or whatever he shares with us. And it may be different. Just because the name is the same, the whole concept of what he's trying to share may be very different. So it's not assuming just because it says bride, immediately it's talking about the bride of Christ as a whole group, or an individual. It could be an individual bride, it could be a person, there's so many different ways of looking at it. We tend to make assumptions because we're familiar with terminology, and therefore we assume when God says this, he must mean what I think he means. And I think we need to go back to engage God for meaning when he talks about specific things. So there was a big issue over, are we the bride of Christ or are we the New Jerusalem? Well, there's a sense where we have been both and we can be both, and some people are engaging. It's not an either or, because there are different ways of expressing things that God can use if we're open to engage him. So, he may talk about a process which is a bridal process, and that might mean lots of different things, into that person, which may not actually relate to anybody else, but it's how God is speaking to that person. So I think let's not make assumptions and presumptions based on terminology that may have different levels of understanding to it. And we need to tune into what level that God is using, because I don't want to be a bride, nothing to do with being male. I want to be functioning fully in full relationship, not in the hopeful relationship that might happen on some wedding day sometime. And that, of course, always puts it off to a future date, rather than, hey, I want to live in the good of being in relationship to God fully now, not at some future date. Will the future perhaps change the nature of that relationship? Possibly so. But for me, I want consummation, and therefore I want a deeper relationship. And I don't think of myself as a bride anymore. And I think God wants us to see the body of Christ maturing. So again, not just being perceived as a perpetual bride in waiting or in preparation, but actually that more and more of us are embracing the fullness of the reality of the relationships that's available to us as marriage.
Right. Thank you. That's good.
Okay. Yeah, some things are complicated, in terms of multiple meanings and multiple levels, and it's just finding out, in any one perspective, what is God saying in that one. And I think people have oversimplified things a lot, because they've tried to make everything mean the same and define it as the same. And God is not like that. God he's multifaceted, manifold in his nature, and therefore has a lot of surprises for us to discover and unveil and to go deeper with. And each revelation of something, Jewish sort of Hebrew mentality was that a scripture or a truth had 4 levels, and then each of those levels had multiple levels. And they had obviously the surface level, and then a deeper level and a deeper level. And I think God is so multifaceted and leveled, we just need to realize there are depths upon depths upon depths, and we've got an opportunity of engaging in them, which is pretty awesome, really. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he's stopping at 4 levels either.
No, that's just their understanding. And I think there's multiple levels, because God's infinite. How could there be anything other than multiple levels if there's an infinite God? Otherwise he's going to be stuck with those 4 perspectives when he has multiple ways of communicating about that. Yeah, Pamela, you've got your hand up there.
Yeah, just to add to all of that, kind of what God's revealed to me in that bride picture is, in Hebrew culture, I think it is that the male adds an addition on to his father or family's house.
Yeah.
While the bride's being prepared, and that's to bring her to his house, essentially. And so I see it more as obviously that covenant agreement on our part for that new beginning and that new foundation, and the union and oneness that's involved in living in the house of God. Mm-hmm. Like Jesus didn't do anything apart from the Father, and the Holy Spirit was upon him. So it's like changing houses, essentially living in a new home, a new foundation, a new, just the oneness that's involved in that, even that term. You're literally giving up your life that you had for this new life, new covenant with Christ.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. And I think when you sort of understand some of the terminology that is involved, which is quite interesting to look at the Hebrew marriage process, from the lakar and the segula and the process of preparation that went on to consummation. You know, when you're looking at those perspectives, you see that the language used in certain things that Jesus said was very much pointing towards that. So John 14 is a classic example. Behold, I go and prepare a place for you. Well, that was what the groom said to the prospective bride, that they were going to prepare the place, which is, as you say, was usually attached to the father's house. And the land that the father had, that he built on a house for his wife or wife to be, attached to the father's house, that they could then go and live in. And when he said, behold, I go and prepare a place for you, then the potential bride would say, well, when are you coming again to receive me unto yourself? You know, so that whole thing there of, in a sense, having this relationship with God, which was based in being in him and him in us, and I am with the Father and the Father's in me, and all of that process was a marriage language. And therefore the whole relational perspective to it is often overlooked, because people just think, oh, well, one day we're going to have this mansion in heaven. And it's absolutely nothing to do with that at all. It's to do with, as you say, living in intimacy within the confines of the Father's house, but connected to it, that we live in our life connected to his in a deeper and deeper way. And that was the language. And it very much, you know, encapsulated the wedding type perspective. And most people don't realize that, because they just read it in English under face value of trying to understand it today. And that's why you get so much confusion about things like that. Oh, Jesus has gone to heaven to build us houses. Right. You know, so of course he's not gone to heaven to build anything. You know, he's preparing us to be in him, and therefore we can be where he is, wherever he is, in whatever context he is, because of that whole relational thing. And when we're joined, we become one, which is the concept of two flesh becoming one, because we're joined to the Lord and one spirit with him. So now we spiritually become sons of God within the family of God, within the house of God, in a way which is so far beyond the normal thought of experiencing the Christian life. It's just so much more that goes beyond and beyond and beyond that, when we really understand the depths of the relationship and what we have in that relationship and who we are in that relationship and who he is in that relationship. So, which is awesome. So, Yep. Other Pamela's got their hand up. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting about the oil and gems resurfacing again, because back in 2006, when I first met Kerry Browning in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, God was dropping all these gemstones. I mean, it was a season where he would just give, you know, he was dropping gemstones. And it was 2007, in Puerto Rico, there was a Bible. And I mean, he put a hook in me. I went to Puerto Rico because it was like this hook in me. I had to go. And I didn't even know where I was going. And he was like, get off this exit. So, you know, my girlfriend and I said, we're just getting off here. You know, we got off. It happened to be the right exit. I barely speak Spanish. And it was crazy. And I'm like, all right, we don't know where we're going. I got to pray. And a woman police officer, can I help you? Because we just pulled over and we're praying. And so I'm looking for this particular church. She said, oh, sure. And gave us an escort to the church. And it's like, then all of that stuff kind of dried up for a few, you know, it's dried up for a while. And now it's starting to pour out again. And it's making me wonder what's going on. You know how you get the foretaste? And then the feast? Something, yeah. It's interesting how, again, it comes back around.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And in a sense, God works in cycles and seasons, and um, often the next cycle and season is at a different level than the previous one. I think the key in it all is not to be looking for the signs, but looking at what the signs are pointing to, and
Right.
to embrace the giver of those signs, not just the sign themselves. So, people running after more gemstones and running after, more oil. The point is actually not that we seek those things, but we're seeking to follow the direction that they're pointing and engage in the one who's actually outpouring that. And that's where immaturity comes in. And people, oh, wow, I want a gemstone. And it's just like, well, whether I get a gemstone or not is not the issue. As long as I engage the giver of the gemstones, I'm going to get much more than just a simple piece of whatever it is, whatever gemstone it is. I'm going to get so much more when I engage the one who created that and released it, and engaging his purpose in it. And so many people stop at the superficial and don't go further into what's all this about? What is this pointing towards? And if it's a sign and a wonder, what does it cause me to wonder about? And what signpost is it? And where does it direct? And where does it go? And that's how I look at these things, because I think they are significant things. And if we miss the significance of them by just getting caught up in the actual thing itself, then we miss out on what God is really doing, and get shortchanged on it all. And so, yeah, what is this pointing to?
And
why is God doing it?
There is an occurrence where he puts, like I say, put a hook in you. You cannot do anything but go. I mean, when they put the shroud on display in 2000, that's what started. I mean, it started my entire supernatural experiences. He put a hook in me, and I had to go to Torrent to see it. And after that, I mean, I saw the Passion before the movie. I saw his Passion, and it just changed. It was like it changed everything in my eyes and my light. The supernatural opened me up to all this stuff. It started in 2000. And it's like, wow. So I'm like, okay, why are you bringing all this back around again? What's up? What's up? Because it comes back stronger, greater, and it might wane again and come back around stronger, greater, in a circular spiral type.
Yeah.
I don't know. God he's just, your jaw just dropped. Drop.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Something about, yeah.
Yeah.
Something about the light.
It's an intimacy, about it all, isn't there? That I love the wonders, and because it's an awesomeness of God, it's that awe of God that makes you wonder, and it's like, wow. But the key is, before I didn't know him well enough to really engage in what the wonders were all about, but now I know him in a more intimate way. Engaging him in that takes on a different level, really. And and I've been involved in, I guess, signs and wonders and stuff since probably mid-80s, and various signs and wonders and things that God has done, and being part of that. And I seem to have been involved in all sorts of different, what you'd call moves of God or revival type things, and some of them were very much very signs orientated, and all of the sort of weird stuff as well as the other things. And it was just like, and it's been a blessing and a privilege to have seen God do that and been involved in it and been used in it.
Yeah.
But all it does really for me is draw me deeper. I just want more of him.
Yeah.
I've given up looking for signs, but when I see them, it just says, hey, there's more of you. You're wanting more. You want us to come into more. You want us to go deeper. You're inviting us to come into another level. And this is just the thing that's, as you say, putting the hook in to say, hey, follow the sign, not follow the manifestation, but follow where the sign is pointing. Where is the road or the pathway that sign is pointing? And I'm going to walk that path to come into, deeper relationship with the one who's opened that sign to say, hey, come over here. There's more.
And he's so faithful. He is faithful to keep at it until the eyes and the heart, the mind are open. He is faithful to keep at it. That's the one thing I have to remember, because people get all wild about the sign, but he's faithful to keep at those hearts.
Absolutely, yeah.
He's faithful. Wow.
Yeah, he's great. Yeah, other Pamela, you got your hand up again. Go for it.
This is off topic, but I wanted to get some revelation or just some wisdom on this. About 3 weeks ago in our bench meeting, we were just rounding up the meeting, and the Lord released what he described to me was a homing device. And it was probably the size of, it looked like a flat battery, round battery, probably like a gigantic hockey puck was basically what it looked like. And it was to be planted in the heart of the community. And so I just asked, release the angelic to do that, and saw a hole being dug, probably like a foot down, and it was a 3-foot circular circumference around, and it was just placed in the center of that. So I really didn't have any, and I actually sensed that it was turned on. It's like a beacon, essentially. And so since that time, we've had some pretty, we've had a few confirmations of that. People have sensed a hum. We've had 2 people that have just said, do you all hear that hum? Which I don't. And then we've had a call not a call, but a connection from somebody in France that has a child that's on the spectrum. And I've had, probably in the last 2 weeks, we've had more families we've been working with families individually, and we've had more families that are coming together. So we've started seeing couples and watching this really explosive unity that's coming within these families that have, if the enemy can separate a husband and wife, he can pretty much pick off the children. And so really watching this dynamic happen has been pretty miraculous in my eyes. So I don't know, do you have any revelation there? I know I have the sense that God will draw all men unto himself. And I'm having a sense that it's a homing device, a homecoming beacon to draw oneness and unity.
Yeah, I guess you're talking about frequency and resonance and those type of terms, which when something begins to vibrate, produce a frequency, then it can entrain others towards it. And I think I would say, looking back over the last 10 years or so, there have definitely been heavenly frequencies, which have drawn me, and my spirit has connected to them, and I've been drawn to follow and continue along that way many, many times, so I think you could look at that in global terms and think, yeah, God is drawing all men to himself, but if he's lifted up, so if that frequency is elevated to a place where it can be connected to, because sometimes people can be in such valleys that they can't really connect because the signal doesn't reach. So I think that's where, you know, the valley, mountains coming down, the valleys lifted up, crooked places straight and rough places smooth, is sort of a, hey, God wants people to come and engage. And I think we can be a carrier of frequency that draws people, you know, but it draws people not to us per se, but to God who's, you know, in us, and then they're engaging God. And so I release frequencies often to specifically draw specific people that I feel led to connect to. And so, you know, you're drawing people, and people around the world are connecting, they're resonating with that, and it's beginning to bring the communication that of that about, you know. So, you know, I think there's a lot more for us to begin to realize in terms of sound and light and frequency and vibration and harmony. And, you know, if this is a beacon, you know, it's a homing beacon that people obviously have to tune into or connect to be able to follow. And I think our job is, with a ministry of reconciliation, in a sense, is to maybe amplify it or direct it or enable others to become connected to it through us. So yeah, I would say, in any sense, you know, the whole issue of these things are, again, a sign or something that's connecting, that draws, and it draws people's spirits, and we're all included in that whole process that's going on. And I think that's great. But I do think we need to make it specific. You know, not every frequency is the same frequency, and you have to tune to multiple frequencies to connect to multiple things. So, you know, each of us in one sense is a frequency. You know, we do vibrate, but there are also specific frequencies for groups of people, for areas, that we can begin to amplify, and for more and more people to connect to it. Because in the spiritual realm, there is no need for a concern of time or space or distance or anything. So you vibrating at a particular frequency, someone in France can feel that vibration and get drawn to it, because we're talking about a spiritual thing here, not a physical thing. So yeah, keep putting out the sounds.
It's moving beyond autism, and it's really about home, like a homecoming. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're a bit quiet, and then you went really, really loud, and you're a bit quiet again now.
Yeah, it's really homecoming, and it's a homing device. And just when I was describing it to you, I could actually see the what it was placed in was almost like a satellite dish, only the satellite dish was on the ground. So I don't really quite understand that, because I agree with you. If it's going to be in height, it would be drawing it from heights, but it's laying flat on the ground, but in a satellite dish in the ground. And the word home and homecoming, and a homing beacon is essentially the crux of it. I'm sure he will have more revelation to come. That helps. What you're saying.
I'm sure, but in a sense, if it's within like then it's broadcast. So, you know, a broadcasting thing beams it up to a satellite, and then that beams it back down to a wider thing that can be picked up by many other beacons. But also, if something's in the ground, you know, when lions roar, they don't roar into the air. They roar into the ground, because the ground actually carries the frequency of their roar much further afield. So, you know, like a tremor or an earthquake can travel a long, long distance. So maybe it's something to also to do with how the frequency is because there are different ways for people to connect with coming home. You know, and there's home as in a place, there's home as in a relationship, there's home from the perspective of obviously God himself and coming back to his heart, coming back to where we first were thought of and desired. All of those things, you know, are potentially, you know, drawing people to reconnect at a level to something that instinctively their spirit knows, but their soul has yet to find the connection to. So, yeah, awesome.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
I find it interesting in this season that many of the, and I use the term mystical just to describe, you know, a tribe of God's people, or, you know, a branch of the church, that the mystical community is coming out with all the business mentoring now. You know, the business. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Have you seen that? Everyone's
Yeah,
a lot of writing about, talking about, teaching about business.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like it's like timely. It's not one, it's several. And it's like interesting. So
why do you think
okay,
that
God,
is?
what about business? Well, I mean, we know the transfer of wealth, and, you know, we know that's coming. And, you know, you had the faith movement who caught, you know, like the foretaste of it, maybe. Like the same thing I was talking about, the foretaste of it. Now, the mystical, which I see the forerunners, you know, the mystical more of the forerunners. I mean, you know, getting into the business. Maybe he is preparing us, finally, really preparing that transfer. I don't know. I guess I'm asking your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean there are. I mean, I've not read the material or whatever. I know of a friend of mine who actually, he's very much into helping people find, you know, their vocation and business as part of that. And his whole aim on it is that whatever businesses that we outwork, that we are there to serve people and provide things for people to bless them. The primary purpose is not that what we receive back, but actually what opportunity it has for us to give. So when we have a business that's, let's say, manufacturing, that we manufacture it not to make money, but we manufacture it to bless people with that creative thing. And the money is a reaping back of obviously the desire to bless people in it. And I think we got to be careful that we don't get into money making schemes or business.
Most definitely.
Rather than, hey, whatever we're doing, we want to bless people with it. We don't want people buying this thing if they don't need it, and if it isn't going to be a blessing to them. So our heart in the whole business thing carries with it a different perspective than just well, this business is going to make us money, and it doesn't really matter what it is. We just want, and I think, okay, I'm not saying that God can't, you know, bless us financially or want to give us an increase or a transfer of wealth. But if we're going as Christians to run businesses, to operate businesses, the way we do it needs to reflect the kingdom and the love of God and the generosity of God and the heart of God, not just be another business like any other in the world. There should be something distinctive, different about what we do in the business world with our attitude, our heart, our motive, than you would find in any other thing. And I think it's important that that is part of what's underneath any business that God might want us to do. Because also within the mystical community, there has been a little bit of the get rich quick stuff, of the prophetic, of getting rich quick by buying into this, and here's the scheme that's going to produce the billions and everything else. And some of the people who are putting out the books were the same people who tried to get people into quick fix schemes, and it never worked. And those people have not yet apologized for getting people to waste their money buying things or investing in things that never came off. So I think there's a balance to be had, and I think the attitude towards finances, money, and everything else needs to be the heart that God has for its use, which is to generously bless. So Abraham received God's blessing. Adam and Eve received God's blessing so they could be a blessing, so they could be fruitful. And, you know, in the sense when it was that we are blessed to be a blessing. So the whole motive for being blessed is not just so we can have more and more and more, but actually we can be a blessing.
Yeah.
And to be generous to those who need to be blessed by us. And I think, you know, I remember having some conversations with a few of these guys over some of it, and it felt like, I've been here before. These were schemes which were, get into bank debenture schemes and invest this $100 here, and it's going to produce millions of dollars. And, you know, none of them ever happened. And I think we just got to be careful that we don't buy into something because we offered something, but make sure that what we're doing is because God has given us a mandate and something for his purposes, which is, you know, continual supply coming from him. The danger in getting rich is we then begin to trust in the riches as our supply and not God. And I think that, you know, and I'm not against money in any shape or form. You know, if God gave me $1 billion or pounds or more, I would be able to spend it all really easily on the things that are within my heart to do to bless others. You know, I wouldn't have a problem spending it, but you have to also get to the point where if God gave you £1 billion, dollars, and then the next day said, give it away, you could.
Yeah.
You could do it because you know that God could give you another billion and you wouldn't have to keep some of it. You know, and some of it is some people want money as a safety blanket so that then they're okay in the future. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't invest and we shouldn't have, I mean, not at all, but it's the motive of the heart that's the key. Whenever it comes to finances, what's the motive of the heart that we have for wanting finances or for the use of finances? And I've found that gets tested with money more than anything else. Seems to, you know, it seems to that money seems to be the issue that a lot of people fail over because of the fear of not having enough, or if I've got enough, I don't want to, like, you know, like the oil, you know, they had their oil full, but they weren't prepared to give any of it away because they missed out on the fact that God was the provider, and that he was the continual provider, that we can trust in his provision rather than what we've made or created. And I know of certain people who are very wealthy, but they're very generous, and they're always looking for what God wants them to do with their finances. You know, and you've got those that, you know, give away the 90% and keep the 10 because they're so blessed, and that's their whole intention. Yeah, there was a philanthropic guy called, what was he called? He was the Carnegie. He was called Carnegie, and he was the one who created Carnegie Hall. And he created massive educational systems from the wealth. He tried to give and give and give and give his money away because basically he wanted to bless people. and he couldn't give it away fast enough. He just couldn't. And he was such an example that his desire was that when he died, he had nothing left because he'd given it all away. But actually the reality was he couldn't do it. He just couldn't do it as much as he wanted to. He couldn't do it because God just kept blessing him more and more. And I think there are examples of people who are not, that money does not have them. Money does not control them. And I think when we get to that point, God will trust us with more and more and more for what we need. Because you don't need more than what you need for all your needs and an abundance for every good deed that God's given you. So some people, that would be very different levels of finance that they would need in their life to fulfill what God's calling them to do, as opposed to others may need multiple more than that, because what they're called to do requires that abundance. And each of us mustn't judge God's blessing, obviously, on the amount that we have, because that would be not realizing that God has us with different destinies and different needs, and therefore different abundances apply. And sometimes Christians look at people and they place a value or a spirituality on people because they're successful, and someone else is equally successful. They may just not need millions or billions. They may need much less, and they're equally successful because they have that abundance for their good deeds, as all of us need to have the abundance for each of the good deeds that we are all called to have and outwork. So
Actually,
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think it's an interesting subject, and I also dictate, or also sort of pick up within the mystic realm, that there are some issues over finance which are not necessarily all healthy.
Being legislated right now, just to let you know.
Yeah. Okay, Pamela. Yeah, you got your hand up there as well. Go for it.
Yeah, this was just taking it down, seriously down. My son's been wanting to learn about budgeting, so he's been asking to take over the household budget. And so I got an old-timey ledger out so you can actually see it on paper, and, in, money out, and all the different expenses. And since we don't use dollars anymore, I just got some beans so that we could figure out, so you could see the flow of in and out. And so we were setting it all up. He's writing it out. And I felt like Father just said, "Can I teach you something here?" And I was like, well, yeah, I'd love to learn this here. So essentially, the money I put in goes in at the beginning of the month. So he just said, "Give it all to me. I just want you to sow it all into the house." And essentially, I was confused as to, okay, well, who do you want me to give it to? He said, "Give it to me. I want you to give it to me." So essentially, we just gave all the money to him, and what he's getting ready to teach me, and it's really that unlimited supply and land of plenty, into whatever we need, almost as a parental type situation. We go to him and he releases the funds for whatever we need, or whatever he directs, whatever he leads us to do, irrespective of what we've given him. And so I'm really excited. I mean, we're on like day 4 now of this budget, and it's really a totally different mindset of being completely cared for. All my responsibility is to donate whatever comes into my being to him, and then just under his direction, under his care, and whatever needs that we have. So I'm really going to be excited to see how this unfolds.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. So when you said give it to him, what specifically, how did you do that? You just put it aside and then he then can do whatever he wants with it? Is that what you mean?
Well, it's really like, almost, if you could imagine, it's his house and I'm just donating what I'm making into his house. So the funds are not mine anymore. And I didn't sow them into anybody or anything. It's still there in the household account, but it's not under my care. So I'm essentially, whatever money I got, I just donated to him, and and now whatever we need, my son and I need, and or whatever he directs me to do, he releases that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so how that's going to pan out on paper is going to be really interesting.
But I think ultimately, isn't that how God wants us to live? Totally
Yes.
dependent on him. I mean, he's our provider. We seek first the kingdom, and everything else he adds.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's cute because what he's having me teach my son, and ultimately he's teaching me, is that, even the Costco trips, you know what I mean? It's like, all right, Lord, so here's what we need, and just releasing that. So it's kind of like nothing without the parental, you know what I mean? Nothing without the Father or Holy Spirit's direction.
Yeah, but I think that's great. And I think that's ultimately, essentially, probably how our mindsets need to change from what we have and what we've given God to the fact that it all belongs to him. My time, me, everything belongs to him because I've given myself to him. I don't have anything I've held back, or do I? And that's some of the questions, isn't it? Because then it begins to test how you think, your attitudes towards it all, because the process then begins to show, well, where is my thinking in all of this? And how is that thinking going to be challenged by viewing everything belongs to him?
Right. And he authors, whatever he authors, he provides for. So regardless of whatever he authors for us, the provision's there. We just have to learn how to receive that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. All right, Pamela, we've just finished last one there.
Yeah, he's even been changing and tweaking just everyday business in the community. One of those, how you get those prayer requests, my car broke down, pray for me, this, that.
Yeah.
I had car broke down, and he provided the funds. I mean, he just took me through this lesson. He says, you're a seed, you're a farmer in the kingdom, you sow seed. You take your car. Here's what you need. You are sowing into the business. You are creating a relationship, a deeper relationship with the person you interact in that business. And he showed me that even when I go to the grocery store, it's seed. It's kingdom seed. He said, change the way I look at all my finances, everything I do. When I pay the electrical bill, I'm sowing seed into this business for people to get paid, to get,
Yeah.
And it just changed my entire thoughts on finances.
Yeah. No, I can see that. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And then, even taxes. I'm blessing the government. I'm sowing seed into the nation. You see, it's all attitude, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. He provides. He has never failed to provide. It's amazing. Awesome. And he's never failed to ask me to send this here, send that there. He doesn't fail there either.
Absolutely.
That's it. Yeah, that's a good call.
Okay. All right. I need to leave it there. So nice seeing you.